familiar with Dhammapada? Nobody, yeah. Okay, how many people here are familiar with chapter 6 of Dhammapada? Even fewer people. Okay, good I checked, yeah. So Dhammapada, it is a collection of sayings from the Buddha, and this one is interesting. So usually in the other collections, like the Nikayas, those are collections of the Buddhas giving lectures. So the Buddha will begin a lecture. He says, monks, these are the 4 ways to do this, and the monks, these are the 7 ways to do that, whatever. Right? Then there's a whole lecture. And sometimes it's a debate. Right? Somebody come to the Buddha and ask him a question or debating him. So the Buddha will give a lecture on that. Dhammapada is different. Dhammapada, the collection, basically is a poetry collection. It's a collection of the Buddha's, of short verses, always in poetry form. I mean, I said when you translate to the English, it doesn't rhyme. So it doesn't feel like poetry, but that's what it's supposed to be. And it's collected there because it's beautiful, it's short, and it has meaning. So the Dhammapada, you put them together, 423 verses. Every one of them, you can derive something from them. And also, in almost every case, okay, I take that back. In every case, there's a story behind it, but the story is not always interesting. So what I can do, so the chapter that I'm asked to talk about is the chapter on the wise, Pandita Vaga. Pandita means wise person. Vaga means chapter on the wise. So Pandita, you know the word Pandit? Right? So if you watch TV and they say there's a Pandit on financial news, so the word Pandit comes from Pandita, which means wise man, wise person. So this is a chapter on wise person, and this chapter is a collection on the Buddha saying about poetry about wise people. And like I say, I didn't really like a lot of the stories in there. I can tell you the stories, but I don't really like them. So this is what I want to do. I will tell you 3 stories. And I think by the end of 3 stories, you will get a very good sense of what it means to be a wise person whose wisdom arises from Dharma practice. And then I go through the verses a little bit, and I'll write down like the main points of the verses. And then if we have time after that, I'll tell you some of the stories on those verses. And then we can take questions. Sounds like a plan? Okay, good. So story. These stories, they are not in the Dhammapada. The first 2 for obvious reasons, because they occur about 2,000 years after the Buddha passed away. The first one has to do with Zen. The first 2 have to do with Zen masters. So the first one has to do with a Zen master. And the story was this guy, he's a Zen master, he's kind of poor. He has a little bit of money in his house. He has a house, a little bit of money, but he's kind of poor. And so he was sitting meditation at night. And then as he was meditating, a robber came to the house. And as a robber was in the house, and the master is not asleep, so the master knows. And the master no fear, nothing, just tell the robber, hey, you're here for money? Money's over there. Take yourself. And the guy, Chade. So he's like, okay. Right? I mean, the monk has no fear whatsoever, right? Which for the thief, for the robber, is very scary. So the robber, okay, I'm going to take the money. He took the money. And halfway through taking the money, the monk says, wait, tomorrow is tax collection day. So I need to pay my taxes. So leave enough money for me to pay taxes, you can take the rest. Okay. So the robber did that. And then the robber took the rest of the money, was walking out the door. As he was walking out the door, he opened the door, the master shouted at him. The master said, hey, you take my money, you didn't even say thank you. Very rude. And the robber said, thank you, and ran away. Right? And later on, he tell his friends, he said, I've been robbing for many years, and this was the most scared I've ever been. From a guy who has no fear. So then the story was that, so after a while, some number of days later, the robber was caught because he was a serial robber. He ran around robbing the whole town or something. So the police went door to door. Said, did this guy rob you? And yeah, that guy. And then went to the master's house. The master asked him, did this guy rob you? Master looked at it. Oh, no, I know this guy. I gave him the money. He even said thank you. Very nice kid. And the guy cried on the spot. So when he finished serving his sentence, he was so touched. He finished serving his sentence, he came back to the master. He asked to be a student. And in his lifetime, he achieved enlightenment. So that's the first story. Right? It gives you the idea of fearlessness as a Zen master. The second story, to me, even more powerful. And this one, it happened to somebody who who's important enough for me to remember his name. His name is Hakuin. Hakuin, he grew up, or he later became one of the most important Zen masters in history. Right? He is, by some account, the most important character in Rinzai Zen, Ling Zichan. So Hakuin, at this point in the story, he was already famous. Not nationally famous, but in his village and his village around him, he was famous as a very wise, very kind Zen master. So a lot of people come to him, ask for advice, learn from him, and so on. So one day something happened. In the village, there was a girl who was unmarried who got pregnant, which at that time in Japan was very shameful. Right? So the parents started beating her up. And then when she started in despair, she said, okay, the father of this unborn baby is the master Hakuin. So they're all very angry. And they all went to him and said, Master, is this your work? And Master said, well, yeah, maybe it is so. Yeah. Right? He didn't defend himself. He didn't say yes or no. So his reputation was ruined. This started spreading. It's a huge scandal in the village. So, and then later on, the baby got born. And the parents of the woman brought the baby to the master and said, your problem, your responsibility. So Hakuin said, okay, never mind, I'll take care. And the story was that Hakuin spent the rest of the year fulfilling a loving father's responsibility for the baby, begging for milk, so on and so forth. And by the time his reputation completely gone, right? Everybody despised him, everybody looked down on him, they say bad things about him all the time. But it's okay, doesn't bother him. Goes around. And about a year later, the girl broke down. Finally, she said, that baby doesn't belong to the master. It belongs to the young man in the fishing village. Wow, cham. So embarrassing, right? So this family, they went back to the master, say, very sorry, we did this to you. And oh, by the way, can we have the baby back? And master said, yeah, no problem, take it back. Right. So this is, and after this incident, Hakuin became very famous. Right? It's like this is a person who lived what the Buddha said, who is immune to the 8 winds. So the Buddha said in the world there are 8 worldly winds. There's loss and gain and loss, fame and disrepute, let me see, praise and blame, and pain and pleasure. And the Buddha said the wise man is immune to all 8. And Hakuin lived that by example. Right. So this is the second story. So again, from these 2 stories alone, you can already have a sense of what it's like to spend many years in meditation practice and reaching a certain level of attaining a certain level of maturity in your practice. So the third story I want to tell is about what happens to some of those really, really wise people when they're dying. And this one's an exception. So don't expect every master to go through this experience. His name is Sariputta. So Sariputta was the top disciple of the Buddha. He is, he's the wisest of all the Buddha's disciples. Maybe I divert a bit, tell you another sub-story, which I thought was very funny. So Sariputta and Moggallana, they are like the 2 top disciples of the Buddha. And according to the text, they both take a really long time to gain enlightenment. Right? All the other disciples of the Buddha, the top disciples, they take a very short time, 1 week or something. These 2 take a very long time. Moggallana take 2 weeks to get enlightenment. Sariputta took 4 weeks. And so after the Buddha identified these two are my top disciples, there are people who kept asking him, why is it that if they are the top disciples, why they take so long? Right? Which is a valid question. And the Buddha had answers for them. And the Buddha said, gave them 2 answers. One answer was, he said, imagine a pot, a small pot and a big pot. Which one takes longer to fill? The big pot. That's why the best disciples take so long. And then the Buddha gave an analogy. He said, imagine a commoner wants to go out. He just puts on the outer coat and he's out. Imagine a king wants to go out. It takes hours to dress up before he can go out. They said, these 2, they're kings. So when I see my own slow progress, big pot. Sorry, I just so many stories to tell. I just tell another story. Okay, huh? So this is a Mahayana story. This is about the Bodhisattva Manjushri. So Manjushri, according to the legend, he is the teacher of every Buddha in the past, like Sanjie like every Buddha in the past 3 worlds or whatever. He is the teacher of all of them. But he himself hasn't become a Buddha. Right? So somebody asked Manjushri, he says, like, all your teachers of all the Buddhas, but you yourself, you're still not there. When are you going to attain Buddhahood? And Manjushri's answer is, when are you going to stop asking the question? So, okay, anyway. So, Sariputta, very wise, and he passed away, according to the legend, about 6 months before the Buddha passed away. So, as he was dying, he knew he was dying. Right? So he went to the Buddha and he said, Master, I'm dying. And Buddha said, I know. And Sariputta said, my dying wish is to save my mom. And they said, I know. And then so they left. So he left and never met each other again. So Sariputta went home. And the thing about mom is that mom is very angry with Sariputta. And the reason she's very angry with him is because because she didn't want him to become a monk. And he became a monk, and she was angry with him ever since. So when the neighbor started telling Sariputta, hey, your son is on his way back, she was happy. She said, finally, gave up the stupid monk thing. Sorry, I can't see, so I'm going to say, can we move this a little bit, like this angle this a little bit so that these people don't just see a whiteboard? Okay, thank you. Better? Maybe angle a little bit this way so that later when I write on it, no, this way. It's parallel to, yeah, thank you. Okay, so when I write on it, people can see. Where was I? Oh, Sariputta, yes. So as he was going home, and then the mom was very excited. Okay, so mom went out to see him, and the mom realized he still has bald head. So she continued to be angry at him. And so he moved back to his childhood room, and he was dying. And she knows he was dying, and she refused to talk to him. Said, until you undo the monk thing. Otherwise, I'm not talking to you. And that one went on until the day he died. So the day before he died. So the night before he died the next morning. At night, before he died, it was said that his room became very, very bright. And mom was like, what was that? Right? So she went to the room, and she saw a line of gods lining up to pay respect to Sariputta. And they all said, every god does the same thing. This god came, and he bowed down. And Sariputta said, what are you here for? and the guy said, I'm here because you're dying. I'm here to pay my last respect. And Sariputta said, okay, you've done what you wanted. Now you may leave. The next god came. Same thing over and over until the last guy. And then all gone. And the last god was gone. Mom said, who are those guys? Who are those gods? So, that was Saka. There was the 4 great kings, Siddha Tianwang. And then the next one was Saka, the king of 32 gods, and so on and so forth. And last guy, his great Brahma. So great Brahma, as in God, a capital letter G God. And mom said, wait, great Brahma, the great Brahma I worship. Said, yeah, that one. The great Brahma I worship bowing to you. Said, yeah, that one. And mom, for the very first time, realized that her son is no ordinary monk. And that was the moment she was receptive. The first time she was receptive. And so Sariputta taught her the 4 Noble Truths. And then, according to the story, she gained Sotapatti, stream entry at the moment. And then Sariputta says, okay, now my debt to you is repaid. Now you may leave. And then she left. His monks came in, and he gave final instructions, and he passed away. So that's the story. So the reason I tell the last story is kind of an idea of the greatness of enlightenment, of full enlightenment, nirvana. Like according to this story and multiple stories, even the gods will worship you. Even the gods will protect you. So that's how powerful it is. So with that in context, let's see, half an hour. Shall I list out the verses? Are you guys familiar with the verses, by the way? Nobody, huh? So I was told before I was here that everybody is familiar with everything, and so I don't have to prepare the slides or anything. So anyway, lucky I have it on my phone. So what I do is, instead of writing out the verse, I tell you what, I will read out the verses, and then I write down a summary. Okay? Maybe I write down a summary first, and then I write the verses. So the summary, there are like 76. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, about 10-ish verses. And sometimes in groups. So the first one, okay, sorry, I don't want to write down because lazy. Okay, if I say it, right? And then, okay. So the first verse number 76 of Dhammapada, is about treasure of the preciousness of the advice given by the wise. So the wise man is like somebody who reveals a treasure, knows where the treasure is hidden. So therefore we should listen to the wise man, and he tell you where the treasure is. So that's verse 76. Verse 77 is the reverse, on the other side. Verse 77 is, if you're a wise man, you should be going around showing people where the treasure is. Okay. Verse 78 has to do with company of wise men, which is that, sorry, I'm thinking, there are stories in my head, and I'm resisting telling stories. I'll tell you stories later, which is a wise man, a wise person, or rather part of the wisdom practice, is to associate with wise people. Verse 79 is about happiness. Somebody who is drinking Dharma, from the Dharma, is always happy. And so the wise person is always happy. Verse 80 is about discipline and control. A wise is always disciplined. 81 is about steadfastness, about being immune to the 8 winds. The wise are immune to the 8 worldly winds. Verse 82 says the wise is always serene, like a lake that is undisturbed. Verse 83 says the wise are unattached. 84 says the wise doesn't identify with glory or possession. 85 says the wise are one of the few. So the wise people are the few who reach the other shore, who gain enlightenment, or the rest of the people are just running up and down the shore, and they do so by following Dharma, which is verse 86. 87, 88, 89 there are 3 verses in one. So it's about liberation, right? Liberation comes from purifying the mind of all bad stuff. They call it black Dharma. So greed, hatred, ignorance, and so on. And then from there, after removing the pollution, you reach nirvana. So that's basically it. So basically, my sense is, once you hear the first 2 stories that I told, all these things make sense. Right? If you remember the 2 stories, you don't have to remember the verses. That was my sense. Do you agree, by the way? Yeah, more or less. Okay. So let me see. How shall we do this? If we want to, I can read out the verses, and then where there are stories, I'll tell the stories. Shall I do that? Okay. So verse 76. The verse is, one should follow a man of wisdom who rebukes one for one's faults, as one would follow a guide to some buried treasure. To one who follows such a wise man, there will only be advantage and no disadvantage. And this story, the stories are very strange. The problem with Dharma, or my problem with Dhammapada stories, is that they're not usually good stories. No, I take that back. They're not always good stories. And so the stories are the context in which the Buddha talks about the verse. Right? So they're not necessarily the best stories to illustrate the verse, but they're just the time and place. So this story is a good example, which for me is not a good story. It's the story of this guy called Radha. Radha, he was an old Brahmin, he's an old man who is not a monk, and he's kind of poor. So he made his living by working in a monastery with Buddhist monks. So he's like the zakong, right, the janitor. And in return, they give him food and lodging. And he always wanted to be a monk, but for whatever reason, they didn't accept him. So according to the story, the Buddha was surveying the world with his supernatural powers one day. I actually don't know how often he does that. Right? It is a morning routine or something. Every 50 days or something. So anyway, the Buddha was doing that. And then he saw this old man. And then he saw this old man is very close to enlightenment. And so he went to the monastery and he asked Sariputta. He said, remember this guy, you know this guy, the janitor? He said, yeah, Radha? Yeah. He asked Sariputta, has Radha ever done anything good for you? And Sariputta said, yes. One time he gave me a spoonful of rice. And Buddha said, he given you that much kindness. Should you repay him? I said, yes. So Sariputta accepted Radha as a student, and Radha eventually became an arahant. And somehow, in that context of that story, somehow the Buddha gave this verse about buried treasure. So I don't know where the connection is, but this is a story. So 76, that's 76. 77, if you have questions, just raise your hands, okay? No, okay. 77 says, a man of wisdom. So remember, 76 is listen to the wise. 77 is the other way around. It says, a man of wisdom should teach and admonish others. He should give advice, should prevent others from doing wrong. Such a man is held dear by the gods and disliked by the bad. Okay, yeah, I'm going to skip this story. Not interesting enough. This one is interesting. Verse 78. One should not associate with bad friends, nor with the vile, V-I-L-E. One should associate with good friends, those who are noble. Good friends here are Kalyanamitta. Kalyanamitta is usually translated as spiritual friends. Literal translation is beautiful friends. Friends who are beautiful. Handsome like me, lah. So I tell you two stories. One from the Dhammapada itself, and the other one from elsewhere. The one elsewhere is from Ananda. So remember Ananda? I talked about Ananda yesterday. He's the attendant of the Buddha for the final 20 years. And Ananda never gained enlightenment during the lifetime of Buddha, right? Because he was too busy working. So any interaction between Ananda and the Buddha was pre-enlightenment. And it shows that it's kind of foolish sometimes. So in this case, Ananda was meditating in one of those rare moments he got to practice, and he had this realization. He said, I realized something very important. He said, half the holy life is my practice. The other half the holy life is associating with Kalyanamitta, right? Beautiful friends. So that's his insight, very proud of himself. Went to the Buddha and told the Buddha that. Buddha said, no, wrong. Kalyanamitta is not half the holy path. It's the whole of the holy path. All of the holy path is about Kalyanamitta. It's that important. Right? And the reason that Buddha said is because if you don't have them, you can't be inspired to move on the path. So these are inspiration. So that is how important fellowship is. So my suggestion for BF is figure out how to expand and strengthen fellowship. Right? So if these people, they are here for their friends, their close friends, their cell groups or something, then you'll be here a lot. Right? So it's not just to listen to some boring old guy, even though he's very handsome, Kalyanamitta, right? But you're here because of your friends. So that's my suggestion. So there's a story. The other story from Dhammapada, even more interesting. So this is about the monk Chana. Chana has a very interesting role to play in the history of Buddhism. Remember when before the Buddha became the Buddha, he was Prince Siddhartha. So Prince Siddhartha, he went out and then he saw four things that changed his life. Right? He saw an old person, sick person, dead person, and a monk. And in everyone he was shocked. And in everyone there's the guy who leading the horse explained to him, this is an old man. Oh my God! Yeah. So will I grow old like that? Yeah. You will grow old like that. There's a sick man. Oh my God! Will I be sick like that? And the guy said, yeah, you will be someday be sick like that. So that guy is Chana, like his driver, his chauffeur. And then when Prince Siddhartha decided to leave the palace to become a monk, guess who was a chauffeur? Also Chana. Chana drove the horse outside the palace, and then that's when the Buddha abandoned the horse and went on his own. And later on, when Siddhartha became Buddha, Chana became a disciple. So Chana has a very special status, right? He's very proud of it. He goes on and says, guess who was the one, right? And he does that all the time. And to the extent that he started bullying even Sariputta and Moggallana. Because he's more powerful, he's better than them, he was the guy. He's the one, right? The other two are just whatever, right? So, and then the Buddha kept telling him, stop doing that. You have to learn to learn. They are the enlightened ones. And he didn't listen. So without this context, if you look at the sutta, the discourse on the passing of the Buddha, so those are the final days of Buddha, just before he died. And then the day before he died, he started giving final instructions to Ananda. And very strangely, one of the final instructions is that guy, Chana, from now on, nobody talks to him. He's excommunicated. His dying wish, like the last day of his life, and that's one of the key things to talk about. And then if you didn't know this context, you say, why? Why is Chana is identified for special punishment? And that was the context. So this is a story. So the reason the Buddha did that was that even during his Buddha's lifetime, he couldn't get Chana to listen. So he decided that as the most compassionate thing to do for him is, on his dying wish, to excommunicate him. And Chana, when he heard that story, he was shocked. And he was so shocked, he started examining his own life. And then he started examining his own thought. And then he changed. And then eventually he became an arahant. Yeah. Fascinating, right? So that was the story. I love this story. So the verse is, so this is about Kalyanamitta. So somehow this story has to do with Kalyanamitta. Again, it's very strange. Okay. So this was what? I lost my verse. This was 77. Okay. No, this was 78. 79 is... Okay. 79 says, he who drinks Dharma lives happily with a serene mind. The wise man always takes delight in Dharma, expounded by the noble ones. Okay, this story. So this story gives you the right context, but again, not so illustrative. So the story was that this guy is a king, and his name was Mahakapina. So he was a king, and according to the story, he had 1,000 ministers, which I think maybe a bit exaggerated. Maybe it's 1,000 ministers and their followers. Right? So anyway, there are 1,000 of them. So he heard about the Buddha. Buddha was in town. And so he said, hey, we should all go and attend his lecture. Right? So he gathered all his 1,000 ministers. They all went to see him and to see the Buddha. And at the end of the Buddha's lecture, they all decided to be monks. So there are 1,001 monks. And then the queen was in her palace. She was like, how come he never come back? So she gathered all the wives of the 1,000 ministers, and they went there to see what's happening. And then they happened to attend the Buddha's lecture, and they all became nuns. They all decided. And so the context that makes this relevant to this saying is that the king, after he became a monk, and the king gained enlightenment, he was arahant, fully enlightened. And after enlightenment, he keeps saying the same thing over and over. Every now and then he just say, oh, so much happiness, so much happiness. He just kept saying that over and over. And somebody asked the Buddha, why does that guy Mahakapina keep saying so much happiness? And Buddha said, that is the joy of enlightenment. And then he gave that verse. So that's the story. Any questions so far? Is this interesting, by the way? Yeah, okay, good. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Possible flaws. Because one is, if you don't associate with the advice, you won't know what is non-wisdom. You have to know experiential knowledge of wisdom. That's the first part. Second part is, if you don't associate with the advice, there's no chance to bring them into the Dharma.
Yes. I agree. Everybody heard that question? That's a really good point. Yes. So the Buddha didn't say don't associate with the unwise. He said, but he did say it's important to associate with the wise. Yeah, and that is an entire path. And for me, I found this to be very true. How should I say this? So I'm a pioneer, right? So if you see my life, everything I try to do is impossible. And occasionally I succeed. And the life of a pioneer, the life of an innovator, and probably some of you are innovators, so you probably have this very similar experience. If you are innovating, there are a few dominant emotional states. The first one is stupidity, is feeling stupid all the time. Next one is feeling like a failure all the time. Right? And then the next one is feeling lonely all the time. And for very useful, very simple reasons. If you are innovating, it means that you're doing something that's never been done before. Or never been done successfully before. And usually there are good reasons. Usually the good reason is because it's impossible. And you are the stupid one to try. And usually you'll fail. Right? No, I take that back. Not usually. You will fail. The chances of you failing the first time is roughly 100%. The chance of you failing the second attempt is roughly 100%. But eventually you might succeed. But it's like you always fail. And the best illustration I've gotten is from this guy called Nathan Myhrvold. So those who don't know Nathan Myhrvold, he is kind of a legend in the tech world. He was, let me see, how should I tell his story? He gained his PhD at the age of 23. Very, very smart. He joined a company called Microsoft. He became the chief technology officer of Microsoft. He founded Microsoft Research. He, in addition to everything, very successful as a technologist. He's also award-winning chef, best-selling author, and is award-winning photographer. So all that in one person. Right? Amazing. And then somebody asked, and Bill Gates, for those who know Bill Gates. Bill Gates says, Nathan is the smartest person I know. That's smart. And Nathan says, if you are going to innovate, you have to feel stupid all the time. You feel like a failure. You feel like you can't do shit. And he said, the comparison he gave was very good. He says, Lewis and Clark. So Lewis and Clark, for those who don't know American history, so the USA bought a big piece of land called Louisiana from the French. Right? And that's basically more or less double the size of the US at the time. And I think it was Thomas Jefferson who did that. And once they bought over the land, they needed to chart the land. More importantly, Thomas Jefferson wanted to find something he called the Northwest Passage. He wanted to find a way from the United States at the time, which was the West Coast, to the West Coast of the US. I mean, not US, West Coast of the continental America. So he can get away from point A, point B, then he can do shipping. And so the people tasked to do this are Lewis and Clark. And Lewis and Clark, they eventually did find a way. They found a way to the Pacific, and they are known later in history as the Pathfinders, very famous. But during their lifetimes, it was miserable. So Lewis and Clark is like, imagine their lives, right? So you have a rough idea. You're going from here to the Pacific, and you cannot go west, because west is Mexican territory. You're going to bypass Mexico. Right? So, I mean, Mexico back then includes California. So you can only go northwest. So you roughly know, go northwest. But day to day, you don't know what to do. Day to day, you follow the river, then the river goes the wrong direction. What do? Do you go northwest or do you go the other way? Right? There's no answer. You say, okay, let's follow the river, see what happens. And you go 10 miles, 20 miles, the other way. You just lost 20 miles. You just lost 5 days. Right? What to do? And then you run out of food, what to do? That's every day the problem. Every day you feel like an idiot. Every day you feel like a failure. And in a sense, they did fail. They lost 1 or 2 men. So that is the innovator's life. And so for me, that's my life. I mean, and people look at my life, they say, well, very, very successful, Nobel Prize, whatever, and meet the presidents. But my inner state, that's how I feel every day. Every day I feel like a failure. And I know it's part of the process, because I know I'm fully aware of it. Still, we're fully aware, still I suffer this feeling, right? So what to do? And I asked that to President Carter, because he was in a similar situation. And he gave the same advice as the Buddha. He says, stay with Kalyanamitta. Right? Stay with and talk to and have close friendship with people who think like you, who understand you, who are on the same path as you. And not necessarily doing exactly the same thing, but they know what you're going through. And they believe in you, and they believe in the direction. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. Right? Otherwise, I won't be able to do what I do. Yeah. Sorry for the long answer. I hope that was helpful. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Where was I? Just raise your hand anytime you have questions. Okay, next one. Verse 80. Verse 80 is about interesting story. Farmers, people who make irrigation channels, channel the water. Fletchers straighten arrows. Carpenters work the timber. The wise tame themselves. So this is a story that's relevant. So this is a story about this guy called Pandita. Pandita was at that time a Samanera, which is a novice monk, so he's not a full monk. And he was a son of a rich man. And then he became a Samanera at the age of 7. So, by the way, I think the story is maybe a bit exaggerated. I think. But, yeah, I could be wrong. But so what happened was this. So he was 7 years old. He became a monk. And then on the 8th day of becoming a novice monk, he was with Sariputta. They were like getting food. And they saw farmers. And they saw farmers channeling the canal, digging canal. And then, so he asked Sariputta what happened. Sariputta explained to him. And then this guy, this Pandita, very young boy, has this insight. He says, water has no consciousness, yet it can be guided to wherever one wants to guide it. And Sariputta said yes. So they walked some more, and then they saw fletchers heating their arrows and straightening arrows. And again, he had this insight. Arrows have no consciousness, yet they can be straightened. And then again, he saw the next site was carpenters. Same thing. Like all this wood has no consciousness, yet they can be bent. And so he saw all this. He said, therefore, given all that, if unconscious objects can be worked, my mind is conscious. I can work it. So he made this determination to tame his mind using shamatha and vipassana. So things I talked about yesterday for those who come. And I'm going to have a repeat lecture at 1:30. So feel free to hear me again for the second time. So with this insight and with this determination to practice shamatha and vipassana, for those, introduction. Shamatha means calming the mind. Vipassana means insight. So he asked for permission from Sariputta to go to his own room and just meditate there and don't come out. And Sariputta said, okay. So remember, this is 7 years old and it's his 8th day or something as a monk. So he sat there, and according to the legend, the story, the Saka, the king of the 32 gods, saw what was happening. And through his divine eye, he knows this kid is going to go very far very soon. And so the story was that he and a couple of gods, they came together and protected the place, kept the place very quiet. My guess is they created a cone of silence. So very silent, and because of that, Pandita reached Anagami, the 3rd level of enlightenment, 3 or 4 levels. So this next part of the story is a bit strange. Next part of the story was Sariputta was going to bring food to Pandita. And the Buddha saw that this was happening, and the Buddha saw that, if Pandita spends a little more time in his room, he will gain full enlightenment. So the Buddha went to Sariputta and stopped him. And he didn't say those things. He didn't say, the Pandita is going to do. He just makes small talk according to the story. What? So how's the weather, Sariputta? Okay, lo. A bit hot. I wish they invented the air conditioning. So anyway, he just had small talk or something. Let me see what the exact words are. He went to engage him not small. Engage by putting some questions to him. So, Sariputta, you think they should invent air conditioning? And then while the conversation was happening, Pandita achieved full enlightenment. So the part that I don't understand is, why don't the Buddha just tell Sariputta? Right? I mean, Sariputta is wise, right? You think he will know, right? So anyway, that was the story. And so after that, the Buddha told the monks what just happened. And the Buddha says, if you are earnest in enlightenment, even the gods will protect you. Even I, the Buddha, will help you. So that is where the verse came from. The thing about farmers and irrigation canals and arrows. Make sense? Yeah, this is a pretty good story. Okay, that was 80. Let's see what's 81. Okay. Another interesting one. 81 has to do with the eight worldly winds. The verse is, as a mountain of rock is unshaken by wind, in the same way the wise are unperturbed by praise or blame. So I told you earlier about the story of Hakuin. Right? That is, to me, the best example of somebody who is unaffected by the winds of the 8 worldly winds. But in here, the Buddha told a different story. Not so relevant, but kind of interesting. The story is not interesting, but the character is interesting. The character is this guy called Badiya. Badiya is distinguished for 2 things. First thing is distinguished for is being very, very short. And because he's very short, he gets bullied all the time by the kids. They make fun of him. The second thing about this guy, Badiya, is he has a beautiful voice. So the Buddha identified him as among all the disciples, the one with the most beautiful voice. Yeah. Which is kind of a strange thing, right? It's like among, I mean, I can remember the wisest, the one best in power, and then most beautiful voice. It's like most handsome, right? So anyway, the interesting about Badiya, because people make fun of him all the time. And so the first thing, he went to a lecture by Buddha, and then after the lecture, he decided to become a monk. Right? So he was a monk. And then something else happened. He's short, presumably not good looking. And people laugh at him. And in this occasion, he was on the street, and a chariot passed by. And this was a chariot owned by a very rich lady, or rather, lady in a very rich family. So as they were driving past, and she saw this dwarf, small little man, and she started laughing at him. And when she started laughing, according to the story, you can see her teeth. And Badiya looked at the teeth and used the teeth as a meditation object. And he gained spontaneous jhana. Yeah, I know, right? So that to me is fascinating. I mean, I can understand if it doesn't bother him and so on, but he used that as the meditation object. Spontaneously, he got it. And so later on, the story was that, let's see, Sariputta started teaching him, and then later on he became fully enlightened. So the story here is about how Badiya keeps being teased by young monks. They'll pull his ears and nose, pat him on his head, and say, "Uncle, how are you? Are you happy with your life here?" And he never gets angry at them. He's always patient. He never said anything bad about him, about anybody. And so the Buddha gave this verse of the thing about the mountain rock and so on. So that's verse 81. Verse 82. Let's see, we have 5 minutes. Okay, let me just see. I just read this, and if it's really interesting, I'll tell the story. Like a lake which is deep, clear, and calm, the wise, after listening to Dharma, become serene. That's 82. 83. The virtuous give up everything. The virtuous do not talk with sensual desire. When faced with joy or sorrow, the wise do not show elation or depression. So basically the same theme as the 8 worldly winds. Verse 84, for his own sake and for the sake of others, he does no evil, nor does he wish to have children, nor for wealth. I mean, back then children were with possession. Or nor for wealth, nor for kingdom, by doing evil. So in other words, he doesn't do evil for any possession. Nor does he wish for success by unfair means. I hope that doesn't include stock options. Otherwise that's me. Such a one is indeed virtuous, just, and wise. So that's 84. 85 and 86, they are twin verses. 85 and 86 says, few among men reach the other shore of Nirvana. All others only run up and down the shore. But for those who practice according to the Dharma, will reach the other shore, having passed the realm of death, or rather having gone into the realm of undeath, which is very difficult. So that's 86. And so the last 3 verses, again, they come in a triplet. And timing is just nice. So 87, 88, 89. The man of wisdom, leaving the home of craving, and having nirvana as his goal, should give up dark evil ways and cultivate pure good ones. He should delight in solitude, detachment, and nirvana, which an ordinary man finds so difficult to enjoy. He should also give up sensual pleasure and cling to nothing, and should cleanse his mind of all impurities of mind. Those with mind well developed with the 7 factors of enlightenment, having rid themselves of all craving, rejoice in the abandonment of attachments. Such men, with all moral intoxicants eradicated and powerful, have realized nirvana in this world. This one, the last 3 verses are interesting. I mean, to me, these are the most important verses in the whole chapter, and it's the only one with no story. Or rather, the story is this. The story was the 500 monks. 500 monks went somewhere on retreat or something, and then they came back. And as they came back, the Buddha just spontaneously gave this verse. So no story. Weird. So that's it. Those are all the verses of chapter 6. Was that helpful, by the way? Everybody? Okay. Any questions, comments? Yes?
Just wondering, I mean, they were saying that there was like 500 years, there's a lot of people enlightened after Buddha passed away. Then after about 2,000 years, like more fast, fast time. After 2,500 years now, it's like more fast time. So Dharma will only last for 5,000 years. So what do you think about this?
Oh, what do I think? Question is, what do I think about more faster time, the time of the ending of Dharma? My view is a bit nuanced, but I can tell you the main one, and I have some other views that seem to contradict the main one. But I tell you, and then again you may disagree. I think that this is a very special time. In my opinion, this is the fourth turning of the wheel of Dharma. This is a time that people remember. 1,000 years from now, they'll be talking about this time we're living through right now, the fourth turning. Right? The first turning of Dharma is when the Buddha started teaching. The second turning, in my opinion, is the emergence of Mahayana. I mean, the things I disagree with Mahayana, but I think it's a really important development. The third turning, in my opinion, is the emergence of Vajrayana Buddhism. And I think this is the fourth turning. To me, this is that important. This time is comparable to those, right? And the reason, the couple of reasons. The main reason is that we can now do things that the Buddha couldn't do, that can move Dharma in substantial ways. So what does that mean? If you look at Buddhism, the Buddha's teachings, I argue that it is basically very scientific. So let's begin with the basic. The basic is, I think the teaching of Buddha is basically, and this one nobody disagrees, it is basically a tradition of inquiry. Right? So it's the Buddha's tradition, the whole tradition of asking questions about yourself, and a tradition of investigation. It's about investigating the mind, investigating dharmas, and so on. And so how is it different from modern science? And I argue that Buddhism differs from modern science in only one aspect. One and only one aspect. Which is modern science is founded on something called third-person observations. Right? So third person means what? Means that if you see an object move from point A to point B, with this velocity and this acceleration or whatever, any one of us will see the same thing. So we are third person, right? Or objective. So and not just that, we can measure. Whichever one measure, if you measure correctly, you find the same acceleration, same mass, same velocity, whatever. And because of that, because of third-person observation, and because they are measurable, we can do science. Right? So once you can measure those data, then you come up with formulas, F equals to ma, and so on and so forth, and then you can predict, and then there is science. So the question is, why can't we do that in Buddhism for the past 2,500 years? Very simple. We cannot measure mental states. Simple as that. So in Buddhism, for the past 2,500 years, it's always been a first-person and second-person science. First-person science as in the practitioner, observes the parameters in himself, of the variables. So he say, now I'm getting into samatha. Now I'm getting in jhana. Now I'm getting so on. So he can only report to himself. And there's no third-person observation. There's nobody can put the equipment and say, now you're in jhana. Right? And second-person observation. Second person is the teacher. Right? Teacher connected to this, and the second person's observation may or may not be objective, may or may not be correct. And there's no way to measure the correctness of the second-person observation. And because of that, we can't do science. So what will change the situation? What will change it is when a third-person ability to do third-person measurement emerges. And if that happens, then Dharma will become a field of science, scientific inquiry. Then everything will change. Then there'll be a huge spread in Dharma. Right? So what does it compare to historically? It compares, I can think of two events historically, one more relevant than the other. The first one, I think the one more relevant, is the emergence of medicine as a subject of scientific inquiry. So if you think of medicine has always been connected to magic. Right? I think there are some cultures where the word medicine and the word magic, they're the same word. There's no difference. Because it's like you're sick, like it's mysterious. Now you eat something, eat some herbs, you put some needle, then you're not sick. This is all magical, right? And then what happened? And then some guy came up with a theory of germs, which is at that time sounds like the stupidest thing ever, right? So you're sick not because of the energy, you're sick because some tiny organisms in your body. And then somebody invented equipment to prove that, which is microscopes. And so on and so on. And then therefore, medicine became a field of science. And when medicine became a field of science, it became unmysterious. Right? And then it can be practiced, it can be measured, and it can be spread widely, and then the training of teachers can be regulated, and so on and so forth. Everything about medicine changed through scientific inquiry. And what I think, for me, the key part is the ability to do third-person science in medicine with a microscope. That was the beginning. We can argue that before that somebody found vaccination, but that was like, at the time they were still speculative. Right? It said it works, but nobody really knows why. But they speculate it's because of microorganisms. And the other example is the arising of exercise. So this is a small example of exercise as a field of science. So again, exercise has been practiced for countless generations. Like even the Greeks have been running Olympics during the olden times. We have soldiers for all of history, and soldiers presumably work out. But exercise never became a science. And then in 1927 or 2027, it started becoming the field of science. So people started investigating. And the first discovery is that the fit person is physiologically different from an unfit person. You can measure the difference between fit and unfit. And you can change. You can go from unfit to fit with training. And that changed everything. And today, we all at least know we should be exercising. Right? Some of us do it, but we all know we should. So that changed everything. It popularized exercise. So the same thing, I think, will happen to meditation in this lifetime. Some argue already happened. And I think that technology will be invented. The science will discover the neural correlates of different stages of, or different aspects of enlightenment. So what is second jhana, what is third jhana, and so on, right? What is high vipassana versus low vipassana? We can find the neural correlates, I think. And therefore, we can open this as a field of science. And therefore, we demystify Dharma. And therefore, Dharma will be everywhere in my lifetime, I think. And so, what is important? And so this answers the question, more fa I think it's the reverse. I think more fa already happened. So I think the past 1,000 years is more fa. And I think this is Zhongxing. Zhongxing as in middle resurgence. So I tell you I'm embarrassed to say that because I'm an engineer. So the next thing I'll say has no proof. It's entirely my belief. My belief is that in 5,000 years, every Buddha cycle is 5,000 years. So the next Buddha is in 2,500 years from now. And in the middle, there is a resurgence. And this is it. This is the Zhongxing, right in the middle, 2,600 years after the previous Buddha. And so in the Zhongxing, I think that we all have a role to play. I think history will remember us. And so for me, my roles are a few. First role is to help invent the science, create a science for enlightenment. And second part is to, demystify it also. But how should I say it? It's important for us to preserve the integrity of the teaching. So it's important for us to not just create a science, but that some large number of us are sotapannas. Some large number of us are different stages of enlightenment. So that because in the scientification and popularization of enlightenment, a lot of disruptions will happen. And then there has to be that core of us to hold the fort while the disruption happen, to live the enlightened life. So that at the end of the process, Dharma stays pure, and not just pure, now it's spread widely. Yeah, so that's my view. Sorry? In English? More far is the end of Dharma, the age of the end of Dharma, and Zhongxing is the middle resurgence. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, that was very speculative. I'm very embarrassed to say all those things. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
Just on the same
counterfeit.
Yeah. So the Buddha gave a simile of how there will be no declination of the Dhamma unless there are 5 different things, qualities that lead to it. And then he compared it with like a counterfeit gold, right? So the commentary said that when there are a lot of counterfeit gold and when it becomes too much, people kind of be confused like what is true and what's not so. So my question is, when we are trying to popularize the Dhamma, how can we make sure that true Dhamma is being preached? And also, the training and concentration is just one of the many 5 that leads to stability of the true Dhamma. There are others like being respectful of the elders, like the teachers, as well as for the Dhamma, the training, and concentration is just one aspect.
What are the 4?
There are 5. So the case where monks, nuns, male followers, and female lay followers live with respect,
Okay.
with deference for the teacher.
Okay.
Then live with respect, with deference for the Dhamma,
Yes.
for the Sangha,
Yes.
for training, and for concentration.
Yeah,
So it seems like concentration, like jhana, is just one of it.
that's right.
So how can we make sure that we fulfill all the other 4 aspects?
There are a few pieces. Everybody heard this question, right? Yeah. Okay, those are just a really good question. So you should repeat it.
So my question in short is, how can we make sure when we popularize the Dhamma that we are preserving the true Dhamma? Because, okay, so the 5 upward qualities to preserve the Dhamma that was recommended by the Buddha was, the very first one is that lay followers, monks and nuns, will live with respect, with deference for the teacher. Then the second one is the same thing, but for the deference for the Dhamma, and then for the Sangha, for the training, and the last one is for concentration. So I believe what you're trying to do is the last piece, the concentration, right? So how can we make sure we fulfill the all other 4?
Thank you for asking. The answer is no, not just the first one, not just the last one. So I agree, those things are essential. And I think that basically, so there are a couple of aspects, and I can think of 2 right now. And so I'm thinking as I speak, so I may not be as eloquent as, I'm less eloquent than before. Which is, so that one aspect is the respect given to the Sangha and the elders. And I think, and this may rub some of you the wrong way, I think that the Sangha has to earn the respect. People, the teachers, people who represent Dhamma, they have to earn respect. They cannot assume that the respect is given just because they are monks. And we have societies people who don the robe of monks assume that they get respect just for wearing those clothes. And I think that is destroying Dharma. I think Dharma was in decline more far, partly because of that. Too much deference to the piece of clothing and the bald head. And then nobody take the time to earn the respect. And to such a degree that there are very few monks who actually practice meditation. Right? That is just wrong, in my opinion. So one piece is they have to earn respect. And so part of our job is to earn that respect by having that level of practice ourselves. Right? I mean, not the same amount of respect as you give to a senior monk, but at least, So the way I see myself right now, I see myself as kind of a high school player, and the masters are the Olympians. So I'm not there, but I'm a high school player. I'm fairly good, right? So that I have certain respect as a good high school player. The other one is a respect for Dharma, and I think the scientification, demystification, and more importantly, the application, that will earn the respect for Dharma, right? So Dharma, for a while, has been dying off in this part of the world, for a very simple reason, but it could be more than that. One very important reason is because it appears irrelevant to most people. So most people, they practice Dharma, it's like, maybe it's something I do after I die. Right? In the meantime, I earn money. And because of that, it comes something you put aside until you're very old, or even if you're very old, you kind of forget, because now you have to deal with other issues. You have to deal with inheritance and your grandchildren fighting each other over your house or something, whether to tear down your house or something, I don't know. Right, so the key part is to that's why I think it's important to demystify it. So this is what it is. This is how it affects your brain. This is how you remove suffering. And this is how it's useful to you here and now. Right? So part of my life's work is, or rather for the past few years, my life's work is in that direction. Right? Making Dharma useful. Not just accessible, but useful. Right? By practicing samatha, you find that you're a better leader. You're a better worker. Right? By practicing vipassana, you have better self-awareness, you'll be more successful, and so on and so forth. Like even here and now, you benefit, in addition to your future. And to me, and if you do that at the current level, when mindfulness is widespread, you earn a certain level of respect. If you can do that for deeper Dharma, like the jhanas, the deep vipassanas, the no-selfness, and so on, then Dharma gains even more respect. Now, I think that's the direction we should be heading. Okay, are we out of time? Or do we have time for one last question? Okay, last question. Yes.
Okay, a quick one.
Yes.
Despite intellectually we want science.
Yeah, maybe give it mic.
Despite intellectually we need science, we want science, but how do we trigger or create the motivation on the interest on Dharma for our friends or families who are very attached to rituals and maybe not so much wanting to know about Dharma?
Attached to rituals. In what sense? In they by sing and so on, right? Then they don't.
How do we generate the motivation to the interest towards Dharma teaching?
So the question, and I don't really have an answer to this, is why would somebody who is a pai sing and so on not be interested in Dharma?
Superstition or attachment towards rituals?
I think it's bigger. I think it's deeper than that. It's not just superstition. Because if you're superstitious, you still have time for Dharma. I mean, you're still not opposed to Dharma because you're superstitious. Right? I think the problem is accessibility. And so I'm going to talk about somebody I know very well, and let me see if this person is in the room, because otherwise, here come and talk about me. So there's a person I know very well who is very close to me, who is self-identified as a Buddhist, self-identified as a strong Buddhist, doesn't practice samatha, vipassana, or anything. The only thing he practices is a pure land, right, which is reciting Namo Amitabha, Namo Amitabha. And why? To go to the next life. And so he's like, Siu Wang Shen. Right? Siu Wang Shen is practicing for the next life. I was like, why you Siu Wang Shen? Why do you Siu for Jing Shen? Right? Why not for this life? Right? So I mean, I'm an advocate of samatha, vipassana, and so on. And this is something very close to me, and still I cannot reach him. And so first thing is like, I kind of feel bad, but I think, right, yeah, even Sariputta couldn't reach his mom until like great Brahma started bowing to him. So I don't feel so bad after that. But to me, it felt like an accessibility problem. Right? So this person, he's also learning other things. He's like learning the NLP and all those things that supposedly help you become successful through training the mind. And so you're training the mind anyway, why not do your Buddhist practice? They're even better. Right? And they're free some more. Right? So somehow there's an accessibility issue. Somehow they don't feel that they want to or should be doing this practice. And I don't really know why. Part of it, I think, is because it's difficult. They're hard to do. They're not easy. Right? Shamatha, so like falling asleep is an issue. Like I think everybody, even 5 minutes of practice is very hard for a lot of people. If I say 5 minutes a day, I guarantee you 90% of this room, after 10 days, they'll stop doing. Even just 5 minutes. It's very hard. Right? So first, it's difficult. Second, there's a cultural bias against it. So if you look at the US where I'm operating, California especially, there's a huge interest in mindfulness. Like if you talk about mindfulness, you say you're Buddhist, everybody goes, wow, you're Buddhist, that's cool. They think it's very cool. Right? Down here, if you say Buddhist, they think you're like old-fashioned. Shouldn't be dating you. Right. So yeah, and also the bias is also for meditation. Right? In the US, if you're doing mindfulness, it's a fad, it's a big thing. Everybody should be mindful. Even CEOs are doing mindfulness. Down here, it's like, it looks so like weird. Why are you sitting there? Right? And I think that bias has unfortunate causes that has to do with the history of Buddhism as it evolved in China. partly to do with the degradation of the agamas, the Arhanjing, in the formation of early Chinese Buddhism. So it's a little bit of history lesson. Like when Buddhism came to China, I imagine the distance in time and space. It was like, I think a Han Dynasty or something. So it's like almost 1,000 years. Yeah, after the Buddha was alive. And then the distance. And then by the time he came to China, there were like different collections. And so at Tian Taizong, they don't really know how to make sense of it because the 5 collections seems to conflict. Appears to, right? So there's like the Arhanjing, the original teaching of Buddha, where things we talk about. This is evil, this is good, this is you put the effort here, you strive for enlightenment, versus the Prajnaparimata Suttas, right, which is no effort. There is no enlightenment. Kong bu yi se, se bu yi kong. There's no enlightenment, there's no this, there's no that. And so the people of Tian Tai, when they couldn't figure this out, and so they made, so the best solution, they came up with this solution, they figured out there are different stages of Buddha's life. They teach different things. So, and that became a popular thing. And the unfortunate thing in the process is that they decided that the Arhanjing, the thing that Buddha actually taught, they're the least important, and called it the Xiao Chen. And the bias is cultural even, right? Even like Siyuji, right? The monkey god thing. Like Siyuji, what did Tang San do? Tang San went to China to get the Da Chen Jing because all they have is Xiao Chen Jing. Right? So the bias has been there for 1,000 years, at least 1,000 years. And so therefore, by the time we got here to where we are today, we had this cultural bias that the advanced stuff, like the Sepui Kong Kong Buddhist stuff is important. This other stuff, not important. And if you couldn't get any of this stuff, never mind. Do the Jingtu thing. Do the Pure Land thing. So the next lifetime, you can practice Dharma. So I think it's all these bias. And to me, by the way, to address Kai-Sin's point, I think this is an even bigger problem to solve. It's a harder problem to solve than the problem that you raised. Because in the West, when I'm doing this, there's no existing bias. So when I talk about things I talk about, it makes perfect sense. Right? Everybody, yeah, I can do this. But in the mostly Chinese, Asian audience, when I talk about this stuff, maybe not this audience, but because you're the smart ones. And how do I know? Because you choose to listen to me. But usually the audience, there's a little bit of skepticism. There's a little bit of resistance. They say, yeah, but it's the Xiao Chen thing. You know? Yeah. And there's like the stories about meditation. So meditation in our part of the world, only a very small number of people do them. And then they do them very deeply. And some percentage of them have existing psychosis that get exposed in deep meditation. So imagine like people training for marathon. A lot of people who die training for marathon die because the pre-existing medical conditions, never diagnosed before, showed up, like a heart problem or something that they didn't know they had before. And if you have a small population of people doing deep meditation, they will expose some of those issues that they had before, psychosis or whatever, depression, suppressed memory, and then they go crazy. And then the rest of people will say, hey, I have a friend, he go meditate, he go crazy. So they better not meditate. So, I mean, when I was growing up, that was a story I heard, those house stories. And so the existing cultural bias. So question is, what is the solution? Solution, I think, is start from the West. Right? Start from the West, get Dharma established in the West, and then come back to the East. Yeah, counterintuitive. Okay, I think we need to break for lunch. With that, thank you, my friends. Thank you.